Hello, 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 and happy Monday. I hope that you are well. I'm excited to be here today, and thank you so much for tuning in. Hello, Caprice. How are you, beautiful? Hope that you had a really great day. Hope that you had an opportunity to check out the description because today we are going to be discussing something that a lot of landlords are concerned about. I've been getting so many emails regarding tenants not paying rent during the pandemic. And many of you know, you've been following me, those of you who have been tuned in week after week. Um, I have been covering tenants not paying rent during the pandemic. And so today we are going to have some dialogue regarding this because landlords are concerned. There are tenants who are concerned as well. And so the discussion today is just pretty much along the lines of what do we do as we discuss the impact that tenants not paying rent actually do have on landlords because there is an impact on both ends. All right. So if this information you find is helpful for you or someone you know who is a landlord or a tenant, please like and share this broadcast. If you are on YouTube, please find my YouTube page and click that subscribe button. All right. Sharing is caring. And so today, I'm not going to take up much of your time, but I'm going to take up enough time just so that we can have this much needed conversation. Thank you so much again for tuning in, Caprice. Hello, Kimberly Parker, who's tuning in from South Carolina. I do appreciate you, ladies. So today, I thought it would be fitting to have this conversation, right? Because I don't think that sometimes people really think from a larger perspective or a larger standpoint what it means when tenants are not paying rent. And yes, I get it. We're still in the midst of the pandemic. And in many jurisdictions, the courts are not open. In many jurisdictions, tenants who are not paying rent cannot be taken to court. However, there are finances, there are resources available to assist landlords as well as tenants. Hello, Rolando. Thank you so much for tuning in. But because, there are a lot of places that tenants can go, I think that there is a big disconnect in terms of why some of these tenants are not reaching out to get the money. So before I get into my 3 points that I have, I do want to share that in a lot of states throughout the jurisdiction, the eviction moratorium has been extended through the end of March. Of course, some places we know have extended much further than March. For instance, the DC metropolitan area, they've extended their state of emergency, which gives the tenants a lot more coverage and to try to really come up with money or to find money available in the community that will help them pay their rent. Hey, Barbara Duggar, thank you so much for tuning in, big sis. So here's one of the things that I always suggest to all tenants. Doesn't matter if they're my tenants or somebody else's tenant, get the help that's needed. Because at the end of the day, it really takes the burden off of tenants having to come up with this money. Because here's the thing, although we're still in the pandemic, although we're still under the state of emergency, right? Rent is still due. No one has said that tenants are not supposed to pay rent at all. So that means that according to the terms of that rental lease agreement, they're still responsible for paying their rent to their landlord. And so if you know that money is available, whether it's through the state, through some nonprofit organization, a church, there are so many places that are set up to get money to pay landlords. Now, some places have even allowed landlords to apply for money that tenants owe. So some landlords have gotten the help that they needed, but then there are a lot of landlords, guys, you would be surprised, who have not received payment, don't know how to help their tenants, don't know where to go to get the money from. And in many cases, that landlord did not qualify, or maybe they just didn't know where to go to get money for their delinquent tenant. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because I really have a heart for so many people who are going through. I mean, this is really a scary time for a lot of people. But here's the thing, a storm of evictions is coming for so many people. And so if I can share some information that will help tenants avoid that process, this is why I do these weekly lives right here on my Facebook or YouTube channel. I share information because I want people to know that, number one, they don't have to be afraid, and that resources are available. You just have to ask questions or maybe do some research to find out where the resources are. As a matter of fact, I've had conversations with tenants who have found multiple places they can go to get their rent paid. And so essentially, if they're going to multiple places to get assistance with their rent, that gives them a little more time to not pay rent, or at some point, they may even have a credit on their account. So money is available. It's really no need for people to suffer. But the impact that it does have on landlords, it's severe. It's severe for a lot of people. Christina, your comment says, hello, can you share when the moratorium ends in DC and Maryland, if possible, please? DC has been extended through May. Do me a favor, Christina, let me know what part of Maryland that you're concerned or you're inquiring about, so that I can get you that information. Because in the state of Maryland, there are different jurisdictions in Maryland. There are a lot of pots of money available. So I'm not sure like which county. Is it PG County, Maryland? Is it Montgomery County? So let me know what county in Maryland and I'll get you that information. Hello, Reverend Dr. Fabian Tucker. Thank you so much for tuning in. All right, so here's the first thing. All right, so we know that there are some tenants who are not paying the rent. We know that some tenants are not paying rent because two reasons, either because they don't know about resources available or because they just don't care. But again, the rent is still due. Okay, let me just state that again. Rent is still due. Now, there are landlords. I have clients of mine, I have colleagues who have tenants, and all of their tenants or majority of their tenants are in maybe some sort of housing subsidy program, right? So that means they may have most of their tenants either in the Housing Choice Voucher, Section 8 program, Rapid Rehousing program, the Veterans program. There are all types of programs. And that's government assistance, meaning that the tenant's rent is already subsidized according to their income. So in situations where landlords are getting tenants are getting government assistance, the government is paying the landlord, and the tenant may have a slight portion that they're responsible for paying. Now, in that case, tenants' rent is, like I said, it's based off of their income. So if they don't have a lot of income, they're not going to pay a lot of rent. All right. So some landlords have not suffered because they have tenants in these type of programs. But then we have landlords who don't have tenants in any of those type of programs. They have tenants who are market renters, meaning that the tenant is responsible for paying the full amount of the rent with no assistance coming in from anybody. Okay, so Christine, I'm going to get you the information for Prince George's County. Give me one moment. Hey, Chuck, how are you? So that's the most important thing, right? So when tenants are delinquent and they don't know where to go, or maybe they're just not looking into places that are available, they do stand a chance of being evicted. So that's number one. Tenants will be at risk of being evicted because although the courts are not open, when the courts do open, there are a lot of landlords that will be taking tenants to court. And that is no fun. Okay. So you never want to be evicted as a tenant. Okay. Because that would make it a challenge to possibly rent again. And realistically speaking, do you really as a tenant want to go through that? Because everybody need a roof over your head. I mean, whether you're the owner, whether you're renting, everybody need a place to call home. So whether it's an apartment, whether it's a single family house, a townhouse, a condo, a mobile home, trailer park, it doesn't matter. People always need a place to stay. And so you always have to have a roof over your head. Here's the one thing that my father, may he rest in heaven. Hello, Michelle. Thank you so much for tuning in, beautiful. My father, he recently passed away in December of 2020 unexpectedly. Good evening, Pastor Bellows. Happy Monday. Thank you so much for tuning in. My father was a man of great wisdom. He was 94 years young when he passed away. And one of the things my father used to always tell me is that, Karissa, you always have to have a roof over your head, even if your lights are turned out, even if you have to go a day or two with no food on your table, you have to have a roof over your head. He taught me that at such an early age, and that stuck with me throughout my life. And I promise you that that holds true today. You always need a place to call home. I don't care if you don't have money to pay your car note or your car lease. Maybe you have to go, for ladies who like to get their hair done. Maybe if you have to go a couple of weeks without getting your hair done. Sometimes it requires making the necessary sacrifices to make sure that you can have a place to call home. All right, so I see your comment, Fails. You said Prince George's just opened up the COVID assistance program last week. Thank you so much for that. And yes, I did share that information for my viewers who are interested in Prince George's County. But I believe that Christina was asking about the extension for PG County eviction moratorium, if it's been extended beyond March. And so that's what I have to look up for. That's what I have to look up for you, Christina. All right. So sometimes you have to make sacrifices. I know some people who say, Karissa, I have to have cable. Okay, well, if you have to have cable, but make a decision if you're going to pay your cable bill or you're going to use that money to pay your rent. You know, what's more important. And so right now I am just strongly encouraging people to just, make cuts where needed. Look at what is priority. Do you really need cable? Do you really need a place to live? Some people have had to make some really tough choices, and they really have sacrificed a lot. All right. True story. I was reading an article, and it was talking about a landlord in upstate. And hey, Dr. Baker, thank you so much for tuning in. Beautiful. And so in this situation, the landlord became homeless because she has a tenant in her rental property that she could not evict because of the eviction moratorium. Right. So it's a multifamily property. She was going to move in one of the rental units, but the tenant promised the landlord that she was going to leave. So the landlord rented the vacant unit, anticipating that the tenant was going to move out when she said that she would. Right. And the tenant didn't. So the owner became homeless because she couldn't afford to pay rent anywhere else, because the tenant, not only did the tenant not move out, but the tenant wasn't even paying the rent. So it really put that landlord in a tight spot, whereas the landlord had to start sleeping in her own car because she couldn't afford it. She couldn't afford the mortgage of the property because she had to take care of she couldn't afford to rent anything because she had to take care of the mortgage of the rental property. And so that's one of the reasons why I share this information with people, because I don't think people really understand the impact that it has when tenants don't pay rent. All right, so here's my second point. Delinquent rent balances can be reported to the credit bureaus after the eviction moratorium is up. All right, so what does that mean? Tenants who are not paying rent, okay, let's say they go through the court and let's say they get evicted, or maybe not. But for the sake of reporting it to the credit bureaus, that information can go to the credit bureau. So the landlords do have a right to report it. Now, I'm not sure how the laws are going to deal with the ability to collect on it, but there's nothing stopping landlords from reporting this information to the credit bureaus. Okay, so that's number one. Let me just tell you, I don't know if credit is important. My credit is important to me. I'm at a 750 something. I don't know what it is, but credit is important. I can recall a time where I went through a really dark patch in life. I had given up. I went through major depression, and I just walked away from everything. Right. So my credit, it went to hell and back. Okay. And so I know firsthand what it feels like to not have the money to pay the bills. I know what it feels like looking over your shoulder when creditors are calling, trying to collect rent, or collect debt that I legally owed, right? And so that's not a good feeling. All right. So we know how sometimes we don't answer the phone. We don't recognize the number. We won't answer the phone. We send them straight to voicemail. Well, I promise you that if a landlord sends that information to the credit bureau, I'm not just talking about a couple of dollars, guys. I'm talking about thousands of dollars. Can you imagine how long it would take to clear that off your credit report? Now, again, I don't know how important credit is to you, but in the world that I live in, okay, credit is important. Sometimes you may need credit to do things, right? So for me, being a full-time business owner and serial entrepreneur, credit is important and I use it wisely. So I am strongly recommending that you consider the cost of not paying rent and possibly being evicted. All right. So Barbara, you said, my mother always said, pay your rent and ask your sister for food. Absolutely. Listen, if there is ever a time that I have to go without food, and God forbid that day ever comes, but if there's ever a time that I have to go a day or two without food, I will always have a place to call home. All right. I will always have a roof over my head. So let that sink in. Let as a comedian Country Wayne says, let that sizzle in your spirit. But no, seriously, guys, always make sure that you have a place to call home, because it's no fun being homeless. It's embarrassing. It's really embarrassing. Okay. Hey, Lynn, thank you so much for tuning in, gorgeous. It's embarrassing to be in a situation where you can avoid or control your destiny. And because of bad choices and bad decisions, people end up homeless. People end up in situations where they never intended. So here's the one thing that, listen, I share this with my kids. I have 4 kids. All right. I know I look young. But I share with my kids this very simple philosophy. Hey, Greg, thank you so much for tuning in. How are you, Moose? Thank you so much. Hello, Lynette. Thank you for tuning in from North Carolina, boss lady. This is what I tell my kids, guys. I tell them this. All right. Teamwork makes the dream work. All right. Take care of your business so that nobody has to take care of you. Because when you open a door, you never know what's on the other side of that door, right? So when you open a door, you don't know what you're going to anticipate. And sometimes there are consequences for choices that people make that they never anticipated. And you can't take it back. You can't stop the consequences from coming. So I'm strongly encouraging and just, again, encouraging again, strongly for people to take advantage of the resources that are available, not just for tenants, but also for landlords. So one of the things that I do, so I manage rental property. And the thing that I tell my tenants is this: if you need help and if you don't know where to go, let me know so that I can find out where to get help for you. And so I send out newsletters. I do a phone-a-thon. And what does that mean? A phone-a-thon is where I do once a month, I'll call all tenants who are delinquent. So let's say rent is due on the 1st of the month. Now, granted, due to the eviction moratorium, landlords, please hear me. Tenants, please hear me. We cannot charge, in many jurisdictions, we cannot charge a late fee if tenants are not paying rent. So please, if you are in a jurisdiction where you cannot charge a late fee as a landlord, please don't make the mistake and tell the tenant they owe you rent plus a late fee. That's not legal. That is illegal, and you can get yourself in trouble. So let me spare you, okay? But let's say the rent is due on the 1st. So typically by the 5th of the month, just depending on that rental lease agreement, all leases are not created the same. And some owners and landlords, they will extend the date. So the late fee may be by the 5th of the month or by the 10th of the month. Just depends on the lease and the laws in that particular jurisdiction. So number one, know what the laws are in your jurisdiction. So if the rent is not received by the 5th, okay, usually that second week of the month, I have a phone-a-thon where I'm calling all of my tenants who have not paid rent to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, we haven't received your rent this month. You have a balance of X amount of dollars. By the way, are you aware that there are resources available in PG? Are you available? Are you aware that resources are available in DC or Maryland? Because I have tenants in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Okay. So I'm sharing information that I know is available to help my tenants because I want them to get ahead of the curve and not have to go to court. I really would like to resolve situations without having to go to court as much as possible just because I have a heart for people. But I also live by a very strong philosophy that if you treat it like a business, it will pay you like a business. And if you treat it like a hobby, well, again, it's going to pay you like a hobby. All right. So I said point number one, tenants will be at risk of being evicted. Number two, delinquent rent balances can be reported to the credit bureaus. And then number three, as I pre-stated, that landlords are financially impacted by tenants who are not paying rent. And it's a sad situation where landlords cannot pay the mortgage because tenants are not paying rent. And that's the really sad part about it, because sometimes tenants don't really understand what they're putting owners through. Now, here's the thing. I get it. If tenants don't have the money to pay the rent, they don't know where to go, or maybe they've applied for rental assistance and it just hasn't come through yet. Some of these landlords and owners have been living from paycheck to paycheck and really rely on this rent money. But here's the thing. Even when tenants are not paying rent, repairs are still due. So if you have a situation as a tenant, let me speak to the tenants. I've been speaking primarily to the landlords. So if you are a tenant and if repairs are needed, landlords are still required to make repairs. Okay? Landlords are not excused. Landlords do not get a pass from making necessary repairs. It is the law that they must make the repairs. And some landlords simply don't have the money because tenants are not paying the rent. It's frustrating for a lot of people. It is so frustrating. I get it. I wish I had a magic wand where I can make this go away. I wish for world peace, but my wants and what I hope for doesn't always manifest. All right. I can want whatever I like, but in this situation, we are still in the pandemic. Tenants are impacted. Landlords are impacted. And so I just want people to realize the magnitude of what we are facing today. And we're still here. And I believe that the eviction moratorium may be extended well into the summer. So I said in DC, it's been extended to May. In other jurisdictions, it's been extended. Now, let me just say that some places, some states and jurisdictions, they are allowing landlords to evict tenants when there is a violation of the lease outside of not paying rent. So, for instance, let's say you have a tenant who has had some sort of maybe situation where they're running a trap house, right? There is all type of criminal activity going on. If there's a severe violation of the lease, in some jurisdictions, the courts are allowing landlords to evict them. So please be careful. If you're a tenant and you're in a jurisdiction where the courts are allowing that to happen, make sure that you watch not just what goes on in your house, but you are also responsible for the company that you keep. If it's in your rental lease agreement, you are responsible for whatever happens in your apartment. True story. I had a tenant who had some family that came over. It was in an apartment building, and there was some sort of dispute, but it didn't happen inside of her apartment. It actually happened in the hallway. So there was some dispute. It became a physical altercation, and they were all relatives. Okay. They all knew each other. They were not strangers. And then something happened and a gun went off. So there were a couple of gunshots in the hallway of the apartment building. So it damaged the door, it shattered the glass, there was blood everywhere, and that tenant was responsible for the cost. Hey, Tabitha, thank you so much for tuning in, beautiful. All right, so I'm going to pause. Let me go to your question here, Michelle. Do the landlord have the right to deny the rent? That's a right that they have if they don't want to accept the rent. That's a great question, Michelle. But it just depends. If a landlord is not collecting the rent, then there's maybe something going on. Maybe there's a motive. Maybe when a landlord, sometimes in situations where landlords just really want to get rid of a tenant, they can deny. So just make sure that if it's you or if it's someone you know, that the attempts are documented, that that the rent is trying to be paid, the landlord is refusing to accept it, and then just make sure that the rent money is not spent. So if you or someone you know has rent money and the landlord is not accepting it, maybe put it in a bank account or escrow to make sure that it is available in the event that the two have to go to court. So if the landlord takes a tenant to court for non-payment of rent, the tenant should have the documentation to say, Your Honor, here are my attempts. I emailed my landlord, I texted my landlord, I mailed the payment, and they returned it back to me. And then like I said, make sure that money is available. Don't spend it just because the landlord is not accepting it, okay? Because it's better to have it versus needing it and not having it. So, but that's a great question. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? Because we are at we're at the 30-minute mark now, and I definitely want to make sure that I'm answering all of your questions. All right, Michelle, you said, but there still need to be a court case, right? Absolutely. The landlord still has to take you to court, or whoever. The landlord cannot just go in or illegally change the locks. That would be an illegal eviction. Okay, so landlords cannot change the locks. Landlords cannot put tenants out right now for non-payment of rent. All right. No, you're right, Michelle. No, they just cannot put you out. They do have to take you to court because I'm not sure of any jurisdiction that would allow a landlord to just walk in and put a tenant out on the street. And if you know of any places, please let me know because I'm not aware of any. All right. I know I've been in the industry for a while. I don't know everything, but I've been around to know many places do require landlords to have to go to court. All right. So that's it. That's my time. That's all the information that I wanted to share. And again, I do hope that you are following me on Facebook. I do these lives each and every Monday right here on Facebook and YouTube. Please find me on my YouTube channel and subscribe. I will be sharing information in the upcoming weeks because I'm getting ready to roll out my next round of landlord and tenant coaching. I have had a really great time just helping so many landlords and people, but I realized that I cannot do it part-time. So I am doing it full-time because there is a need. I do have a 6-week class that I have had the pleasure of working with a group of people, and this round is going to be even better and greater. And so if you are a landlord, if you know of a landlord that would benefit from 6 weeks of working with me, please let me know. I am definitely God thankful, and I'm honored for the opportunity that He gives me to make a difference in so many people's lives. And again, this is what I do each and every Monday right here. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Please make sure that you like this page, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and do share this broadcast with somebody else. If you have questions, if you have comments, drop it in the comment section or inbox me and I will follow up. And so for you, who was that? Let me see. Christina, I'm going to inbox you information that I find for you for Prince George's County. All right. So again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm going to say bye for now, and I'll see you all next week.